interesting talk that Lippold did, and you know, I understand, I'm into it and I'm geeky, but I'm just sort of on the surface of that. But it's quite fascinating to see it. But what's really fascinating to me is you look at this, these abstract, these numbers, this system that's, you know, based on the human experience in life, and then all these things they're flying by, and you talk about nanoseconds and picoseconds and word lengths, and then it all comes down to, you know, out through the ether and into just a beautiful pitch that just starts to communicate. It's just a very wonderful thing. So I'm on the other end of that Hawken audio experience, and been heavily involved, I guess as most of you know, with the sound engine part of it. And
the name gives it away.
The name, yeah, that's it. Wasn't my dad. But
his name is Matrix.
Yeah, my name is Matrix. Yeah. I was up for the role, but Keanu got it, so I don't know. And it's been very interesting to sort of expand where the EaganMatrix started. It started as a sort of a dream inside a prototyping environment in using Kima, and then my lifelong love in this has been just expression, and it was always frustrating for me that there just was no real way to feel more intimately connected with instruments. And when I met Lippold and I saw the Continuum for the first time, which was over 20 years ago, it was an amazing, you know, transcendental experience that I thought, well, here's something that's actually very sensitive and immediate, and it just, there's all these possibilities. And I'm inherently into sound design, so and if anyone who starts to get into Kima, that should be something that you really, really love, because that's all it's all about, a playground in sound design. And so when that started to happen, I started this relationship with Lippold and bought, which I thought was one of the many Continuums from the Hawken Audio Corporation, and I would be part of their channel and their support group. But in actual fact, that was the second one, I think, that I got. And it's come a long way. We've gone through a lot of evolutions, and during that evolution, the major one for me was the ability to develop an engine that was dedicated to some of the sound ideas and constructions that I had. From that, it's just been this wonderful platform that has been able to, through Lippold's excellent guidance, been able to be very, very stable and very, very flexible. And there's an amazing possibility of things that can happen inside this environment. And so, like this idea of an embedded system, and so when you embed something, you have walls around it, and the walls have certain things that you can do inside this playground, certain things that are just kind of impossible, you know, that when you look over the fence. Well, the truth of the matter is that inside any sort of playground, there's just entire worlds of exploration. And it's a beautiful thing to have an embedded system like that. It's like, you know, just the same way that if you were a prisoner in a room, you would, I mean, those are very dire circumstances, but the human spirit is strong to find anything, life inside twigs, and, you know, it's really worthwhile to have those limitations, and the limitations lead you into particular ways. It happens in the sound design that I do, because I'll have a general idea of something that I want to make. You know, I'll use to say, well, I want to make something that really sounds like a gong or has that kind of feeling. And then as you start to explore it, you realize, not quite getting it, but this is actually very interesting. So, you know, and then you go over to this thing, and then the beautiful thing about that is that when you name your preset, you don't have to call it a gong. And people say, well, if you do call it something like a gong, they say, well, what is it? It's kind of like a gong, but it doesn't really sound like a gong, but it's not a gong, you know. So it's a good thing. So the engine existed in the Continuum and grew with the Continuum, and it's expanded on our end into the Continuum Mini, which has been actually refreshingly popular. It's been really nice, and it's just not strictly from an economic sense. It's also from a portability and a playability sort of sense that people enjoy this different experience, and they continue to sell, and you know, we're really, really happy with that. And recently we got into, well, not that recently, but because of COVID, it still seems recently, the EaganMatrix sound module. That sort of, although I've been into modular synthesizers, and I have an older Serge modular system, it's quite extensive, and I've collected it over the years. I was never into Eurorack, so even though I was aware of it, at that point I got into Eurorack, and with my knowledge of observing Eurorack over a number of years, and of course once you dive into it, you realize you thought you knew, but you don't know until you actually start playing around with something and start to interact with it. You realize, okay, where's my heart leading with me? What are the things I'm reacting to? And so it's a very dangerous thing. As many of you know, in Eurorack, it's pocket draining. So that expansion of the engine, we were approached by Expressive E, which I'm sure Guillaume is going to talk tomorrow more about, and with Lippold, and talk about that relationship. But it's a very interesting thing. So we say, okay, well, they came to us primarily like, we want an expressive sound engine into this new product that we're going to develop. And I was at that point, I was familiar with the Touche, and I tell people this quite frankly and quite honestly, I did not think this was possible. Like, to me, this is magic. This is, you know, it's absolutely mechanically, it's just beyond the sort of things that, you know, and you hear a lot of people talking about it. It's easy to talk about things. It's like a piece of music that you're running, you conceptualize it. Oh, it's really perfect up here, but it's got to be out here, you know, and that's the real hard part. Well, this is out there, and it's really quite amazing. And so we've been doing the sound design for the Osmose, and the bulk of that work has been done by Guillaume, and so he's been in charge of that entire thing. And it's been interesting translating existing Continuum sounds into the Osmose. And what you quickly realize, if you have both, fortunate enough to have both of these instruments, is that they're even though they're very, very similar, they're equally very, very different. And the picture that we have, or the ContinuuCon conference showing both those products together, is actually this amazing environment of being able to play within these two worlds of the freedom of a continuous playing surface and everything. You know, it's almost like, oh, this is my additive synthesis bank. I can do anything I want with it. Well, you've got to be responsible for a lot of detail when you play on this. And then the freedom of taking your experience in playing a keyboard instrument and instantly translating it into those EaganMatrix sounds. But at the same time, having all this expressive possibilities. So they're two different things. The Osmose is amazing, best aftertouch on any MIDI controller you're going to find. So I'm going to show a sound that I designed originally on the Continuum, and how it translates over to the Osmose. Okay, and yeah, and actually I covered all these points. So I was referring quickly to the playing techniques that happens with the Osmose and the keyboard things, and that's a good and a bad thing, because what happens now is people expect it to be a piano, expect it to have that kind of response. an advantage of the Continuum is, in spite of the surface that it has and these keys that it has painted on the surface, people don't expect it to be able to play ragtime piano style on it, nor should they. And if they can, please show me the video. But on the Osmose, they approach it and they inherit. Well, while it's an advantageous thing in a certain sense to have this keyboard, they inherit everything that the keyboard represents. And then it's an advantageous thing to be a programmable synthesizer, but they inherit everything that a programmable synthesizer inherits. So when people see the EaganMatrix. Continuum has that same sort of issue. One thing that's interesting with the Osmose, I remember when I first played it, it really reminded me of a Mellotron. And Mellotron keyboard, which has this kind of, and spongy is a bad word, but I don't know of another way to sort of respond to it, but it's like the best possible type of continuous thing. And when you do sound design, oftentimes in a continuum sound, you have a tremendous range in Z. But when you start playing on an Osmose, it's very easy to bottom out on Z, because people just play it, and they play and people are used to holding down chords, and they bottom the key out before the aftertouch area. So that's actually a really important thing to keep in mind when you're changing sounds from the Continuum into the Osmose, and it's not really tricky to do that. The other thing that is different is the availability of the Y direction. So in the Continuum, of course, we have this paradigm of this three-dimensional space where X and Y are on one plane, then you go into the Z direction with the other. So it didn't seem to be an argument at all when we're trying to translate that into the Osmose experience, that we would make X, of course, the pitch direction, and of course Z, the pressure direction, but then Y would become expressed as this aftertouch, and polyphonic aftertouch. So consequently, what you really have in terms of a pressure point is you go down and then you have a train station stop in the middle, and then you go down further through the Y. So Z plus Y becomes the entire sort of range of things, with a nice kind of resting stopping point, which most keyboard players would be very comfortable holding in. So when you think about sound design, you think about that kind of aspect. And because the Y is so good, it just opens up so many possibilities compared to any sort of traditional keyboard experience. Even the best aftertouch, you just never experience anything like the way it's implemented on the Osmose. Another thing to think about is the way that pitch deviations happen. And this is really, I think, a very fundamental area where the playing experience differs. So I've programmed, which I consider a similar sound on both of these, and when I play them, I'm better playing it on the Continuum than the Osmose at this point, because I've only done that recently. But it just, even in spite of that, it just sounds different. Same sound, but just all the sort of things you can do with it, it sounds different. So the sound that I did was this old preset. This would be a preset that, I don't know how long ago I did this thing, but we had these specialty sounds, and this is a converted specialty sound made into an EaganMatrix version. The specialty sounds are not programmable within the matrix. And so we were converting a lot of these specialty sounds into EaganMatrix sounds. So it's kind of a blown tube timbre, flute-like, like a pipe. But what's interesting about this thing is it's kind of unreal in the sense that it's very beguiling to me. I love this sound. It doesn't really occur in nature naturally that when you play this thing, you get these very weird spread of harmonics. So normally things don't happen that way. Is there any sort of acoustic model this could be combined to?
No, so some of the harmonics go sharp, some go flat. And good luck building that.
Yeah.
So it's a physical model of Minecraft physics or something. It's not, you couldn't actually build it.
You can build it in here. And so what I find with this sound, it's much like a lot of the presets, it really lends itself well to monophonic playing. It's really designed that way to be a solo instrument. And what you gain on the Osmose is a much easier way to play in tune in polyphonic playing. So when you want to optimize something for lead line playing, what I found is that you start to dive into different areas of alternate control, much like people do with modulation and pitch wheels. And so a lot of that interest comes from the sliding between timbre points, that you get this shift, and it seems like this very, very nice animation that happens inside the sound. And I programmed this in the Y direction of the continuum. Because the Y is not absolutely accurate, it's relatively accurate, and that's fine because this is a sort of thing that you can do a reaction to, and the musicality is actually in a lot of ways benefits from that kind of imperfect absolute capabilities. So the other thing that this sound has a breathy noise component. So you can modify this preset with pitch, with Z, which gives you timbre changes of some sort, the Y direction, which gives you this stretching and compression of this harmonic space, and then a pedal 2 input, which gives you an additional breathy noise. So here's what the sound structure looks like. It's actually people say the EaganMatrix is complex. Well, it's actually very, very simple when you represent it in this sort of format. But of course, what makes the Continuum and the Osmose special is the details, and this shows you none of the detail. But this is your basic physical model. So we have something to get the party started. That's the noise. And then it goes into this wave shaper that immediately sends it into this bit graph. And the bit graph is like these series of harmonically spaced resonant points. And that's what you're playing around with when you go with the Y. You're changing the frequency of these resonant points. And in order to make it a more sustained sound and under finger control, you feed that sound back into the wave shaper. And that's where the energy builds up. And what's interesting about the wave shaper is that as that energy level changes, it reacts to it and changes the output, which then again feeds into the bit graph, and then again comes back in, and eventually you go through a high pass filter, which is not really super critical to the actual sound itself, but it just was kind of like the same way you would use a tone control in a guitar amp. I just thought, oh, let's roll off a little of the bass. So that's where the high pass filter comes in. So that's the same structure represented here in the EaganMatrix. So there's just, let's see if I've got this. Yeah, so that's the way it is in the EaganMatrix. The main thing is this stack of things. You see an oscillator one that are down there, and that's where the wave shaping path happens. So the noise enters in on the top. You can see if I superimpose these a little bit. And then it comes in and around. So you have to sort of think in circles like this within the matrix. The one thing I didn't show in that previous graph, which would have been, oops, here we go. Is there's one other component right at the very end I forgot to put in, and that's the convolution IR. And these are really magical things. It's the same thing as if you decide to feed your sound through, it's not the same as the ohm, but it's the same principle where what I want to do is I want to color the sound, I want to give it dimension, and it's not perfect, it's not linear, but it's better. And so in a lot of ways, it's the same reason guitarists go through a particular amp. They like the color of particular speakers. It's all a sort of coloration. And it not only does it do the coloration, but it does some recirculation in its own. And so it tends to, which is the negative word smear, but it's not a smearing in that sense. Tends to color it in that sort of way. So you get all the phase relationships going through as well. Not only just the equalization changes. Okay, so the challenges when you translate this. So the first one was, I needed to adjust the amplitude response, like I was talking about. Now you're not dealing just with Z, but now we have a combination of Z and Y. So you want to take advantage of that. You're inherently going to find that the preset is going to be louder because you're used to playing softer on the Continuum. Actually, I should play you the sound now so you can hear it. I love that sound. And in reality, when you start to get into programming, it's not really complex. You set up the structure, and then you just start to poke at it, and eventually, beautiful things happen. So I have to adjust the amplitude response. The other thing you have to do on the Osmose is implement the kind of pitch bending parameters that you're going to want to do. And this is for anyone who gets into Osmose playing, they'll immediately want to hook up the EaganMatrix, and really what they should be doing is forgetting about the EaganMatrix and exploring the wonderful GUI that's inside the Osmose, because there's a world of sound exploration in there that I don't think people really appreciate. In fact, there have been reviews that have been done. They've made some, well, overall glowing comments about the Osmose. There have been some things, well, this is actually hard to do. And in actual fact, if you just did a little menu diving, which is surprising that people don't do this, they didn't do this, these things are easy to do. So you want to implement the pitch bending parameters that are inside the GUI for the Osmose. Currently, those parameters are outside of the realm of what is an EaganMatrix.mid file, a preset, but they will be integrated so that as you share presets, not only will you get all the EaganMatrix program, but you'll get the very specific Osmose parameters that are there. But it's easy enough to set it up within the GUI. So you want to adjust that, and if you're playing something that you are going to play with a lot of pitch bends and a lot of pitch expression, and you're playing monophonically, really it's a good idea to go to the Osmose and turn off all the pitch assistance and just try it, and see where you're getting with it. And you'll quickly learn, how things translate. And for every single preset, it's different. It depends what you're going to do. I programmed a clavichord sound on the Osmose, and it absolutely rock solid pitching thing. But the pitch comes from bending the string down into the Y direction. So a tricky thing to do within the Osmose is, well, now I have this sound that it doesn't matter where I start playing a note, I can be anywhere in Y. So how do you do that in an Osmose? You have to figure out a way to make...
Just a good question, because I'm not that familiar with the Osmose. So is it true that you are at maximum Z before you can make any change to Y? Is that
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And it's amazing, when I first heard that about why, it's amazing how useful it is.
Okay.
It's actually all sorts of things you can do with that that you can't do if it were different. So it's a very odd limitation and also feature that's extremely useful. And another thing to notice about Osmose is the Y is super accurate once you get into it. Where on the Continuum, it's quite approximate where you start, and it's a very different, because your vertical direction of your fingers also is so good at precision where the front to back, I mean, your fingers aren't on a straight line and such. It's actually a very different experience. And in some ways superior, in some ways not superior. It's just different.
That's the beautiful thing about it. It's different. Yeah. But it truly is Z plus Y equals the new Z. With a nice train station stop in the middle. So, but here for this sound, a lot of the life comes from to do all that sliding back and forth. So, that is a solvable challenge, as you'll see in the Osmose. So the first thing that I want to do is adjust this basic volume parameter. So here's where we have that high pass filter coming out into this master section. You can see the highlighted where formula J is. And this actually ends up being the main point where volume change happens. And so here's a comparison of those two formulas. We can see the Continuum one on the top and the Osmose one on the bottom. And so what I ended up doing here was the Continuum one, we have reading this, it's just 1 times whatever that Z value is over on the other side. And so what I ended up doing is splitting that up. On the bottom one you see in the Osmose, now we have Y and we have Z added together. And because now I'm adding 2 things, just reduce the level. So that's the basic principle, but this is the beginning of the journey of making a new sound, because you're never going to get this thing over here, really, because it's the surface. And so as you do this, you take these opportunities to change things around or try things. And in the Osmose, it just seemed better for me to have a linear change in Y. It didn't really matter, it seemed, to go either way. So you make those sort of differences. Let's see, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Continuum in the Osmose. Okay. So now the next thing is to go in and implement those pitch parameters. In this particular case, I changed the sensitivity curve, the stabilization, just basically turned it all off because I wanted as much pitch flexibility as possible. And then a technique that I really haven't developed yet, and it'll be a while before we see really, really good experienced Osmose players, but to be able to really finely control the bend range of an X note. And I find in the Continuum, there's just so many different ways to do bend, and I've been playing it so often that I don't even think about that sort of thing. So here's where I'm using a little bit of assistance, and I reduced the bending range to half a semitone in each direction. The other thing that you want to do is change what I did here. There is no mono interval. So is everyone familiar with what the mono interval is on a continuum? So there is no mono interval needed here on this because my finger is the mono interval when I play this thing. But on the Osmose, if I want to do a bend that's a minor third or a fourth or whatever, you want to set up a mono interval. So in the case of this Osmose sound, I set that to 5 semitones because I wasn't really interested in getting the experience of playing smaller intervals. It really was about having this lead line that I could play with. Okay, so here's the hard thing to do is we want to make this Y control continuous and dynamic. Well, you can do that one way by assigning it to a pedal. And since we're playing monophonically on this sound, it doesn't matter. The pedal is a global control over all voices that are inside the continuum. But if you're playing monophonically, then it becomes this voice-specific control. So, and there's 2 pedals on the Osmose, and but I already have 1 pedal assigned for this noise component. So the thought, okay, well now you're going to have 2 pedal controls. It's going to be a little bit hard. So, but there is a way to do that. There's another sort of interesting control that you can use, and you can activate the touch area. And actually, the touch area is something that does anyone who's programmed in the EaganMatrix design to sound using the touch area? Bernhard, okay, great. And did you like the experience? Was it?
Yeah, it depends. I use it also for special needs.
Yeah. So it's interesting, much the same way as a violinist, they're using 2 hands to create a single pitch. One of them is giving you amplitude and timbre changes with the bow, and the other one's giving you the pitch information. You can do the same thing on the Continuum. And of course, now you can do the same thing on the Osmose. So, and I've done that on, let's see if I find, what is that? Yeah, so here's a variation of, but I'm not actually getting any amplitude information. It's all coming from contact with this lower part of it. Which means you can get timbre changes and activate effects all within that one hand. It's a pretty powerful thing to use, and so.
Could you have multiple touch areas, or is it just?
It's a single touch area. Yeah. We could, but we don't. Well, yeah, you have 5 fingers.
I was thinking it's almost like a multiple pedals of that.
It is, but it's a 3-dimensional pedal.
Yeah, it's what I mean. So
It's really quite powerful. And when you do that, when I design a sound doing that, part of the volume comes from each side. The wonderful thing about the Matrix, you can do so many things. So everything can be delegated in different levels. And like Bernhard, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, could you describe, it's hard to see, could you describe what you're doing with the touch area as you play?
Yeah, so what happens is let's see if I've got the slide. Oh yeah, I'll go to this slide here. So what I was doing was, if I assign this touch area to particular, well, I might as well advance to this slide here. Yeah. So I took that touch area and assigned it to an area on this virtual continuum. And now when I play, my right hand is over here, and my left hand is here. This is polyphonic, and this is monophonic. which leads you to interesting, like string-like parameters. So if you're playing across two strings on a violin, both under the same bow control. So that's the idea of the...
But just to clarify, there is Z or pressure information coming from both. So
Yeah.
the notes have their individual, some effect individually from the pressure.
That's right, yeah. But the commonality is that, you know, it's basically, if you're using the touch area in one dimension, this is no different than assigning a pedal. But the reality is it's three-dimensional.
But you're using a finger, which is pretty...
That's
different than
exactly
a
right. And that, yeah, that's a major thing. And that has nothing to do with resolution. It's just, and some people are good.
How did you activate the delay? Yeah, that's...
The delay?
The delay which you gave, like...
So when I play down... Yeah, so what I did was, that's programming, there is a delay, and the delay has an output. And then the trick I'm doing here is the delay output is inversely related to the X direction. So the delay will get louder as you move down into the lower area. But you can make that, how that changes, there's so many different slopes you can do. So actually you never hear it here, but the touch area is, this is a beautiful thing about the Continuum too, is like where a finger, where it's responding to, it actually depends where it came from. So in that way, it's not very a fair societal thing because it's very responsive. Hey, where did you come from? You know? So, but this, if you touch here first and then move down here, it's still a touch area thing. You can also start a note down up here, touch area, go down here, and then go down here, and you can go in, and then you can visit, but you can't stay. So then you have to get back out again. So, but yeah, no, you go ahead. Go.
So is that delay implemented on any things that we have, or is this a special sound? Because I guess I never went down that far in the touch area.
I'm available for programming.
So, you know, the kind of the string overtone things, and for volume, I've only ever used it for.
Yeah. That can be programmed. There's no, that's a whole nother subject about what's easy and hard to do, and actually we were discussions with Expressive E about the sort of component changes that we want to play it on top of this to make that stuff simple. But this does require particular EaganMatrix programming. But as you slowly go through it, I mean, we've tried to make it as logical as it looks within that sort of space.
So none of the factory sounds have that delay implemented?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Oh, on the Continuum or on the Osmose?
On the Continuum.
There is one that I did, which is because I'm not like Sally. I'm inherently right-handed specific. Like she's wonderfully ambidextrous in this sense. But there's another patch that I did for the Continuum. I just remembered it's an organ patch. So you play like 3 notes, and then basically you can use your touch area, which is now on the high end in the right hand, and play it, and you can give you a little bit of vibrato and a little bit of analog delay effect as you hold it up there. I forget where it is, but it's really uncommon. And as the show of...
There's an organ sound.
There's an organ sound, yeah. So if Bernhard wasn't here, maybe we would be, I'd be the only touch area programmer. So, but I think it's really powerful, and if you're into doing solo lines and you have 2 free hands and you're not trying to do a Keith Emerson on the other keyboard, then hey, go for it. It's like this sort of cool things. So what I got to do is so this is a cool thing to do because I can do this on the Osmose. I set up the touch area, which extends from here to here. Side note, there is a way to make the touch area extend the entire area just by setting up a split point, but that's not really important here. And I knew for this particular sound, because all I was really doing was implementing Y, I only needed 1 key for this touch area. So now the touch area becomes 1 key wide, and in that I have now my new Y, which is the traveling of Y and Z in the Osmose. And so this lines up perfectly with the last note on the Osmose over here. So this becomes my Y controller. And though it's a little hard to see on the surface, but as you put your hand on the lowest note of the keyboard, your thumb is on this low C, and now one of the beautiful things about the Osmose is that the pedal 2, which I have for noise, is automatically assigned to the modulation. So you can play this thing by just holding down this note to get your Y direction, starting anywhere as you start a note, and here's the noise. I guess I might as well do a demo on this now.
Yeah.
And that's all those timbre changes.
Also, I don't know if people are familiar with the pressure weight or portamento on the right hand.
Yeah, so that's where I'm getting these effects. Instead of... And the cool thing about this, it's a trick I was showing Rob, this is let's suppose you want to go up from F sharp to G. And so you can do that by doing pressure weighted portamento. As actually it's it. That's not really. But you can also do it by playing F and G, and then right in the middle is F sharp. Which is actually easier to control because you can park your finger.
Note averaging.
Note averaging, yeah. So that's, again, those are like Rob later will talk about playing techniques, and he's done a plethora of these really nice little things, all these little things that are just like amazing on the Continuum. And there's a series of things that are amazing on the Osmose too. Which we don't have anyone available yet. So now we have to modify all these. How am I doing? I got to finish at 12, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what we want to do is go through this thing and say, where is Y? I've got to dig through this entire thing and find Y in all these program points. Well, nice thing is that we have this really great thumbnail area on the right-hand side, and everything with Y is highlighted. And you can see all the formulas now that have Y. But there is one formula that will not show up there, and we have these non-changeable programs, and one of them is the Y that's inside the bit graph area controlling the an offset. So you have to be aware of that when you're looking for all the Y parameters. So now it's a matter of going through and finding the presets here. Okay, so this one, what did I end up doing here? Yeah, so this is Formula A. I don't think I ended up changing this one very much. Yeah, so this would have been an instance where, hey, this is a part of Y that I still like under my right hand. Oh no, I'm sorry, I did change this one. Yeah, so what the subtle thing here is to look at this symbol. That's right here. And so this is when you go into this auxiliary area and you get this pull down, there's a basic thing that says, well, who's going to evaluate this formula? And it normally defaults to that just a standard finger that's going to be evaluated. This symbol means it's the touch area that's going to be. So I globally took all this control and took it away from the right hand and placed it over to the left hand just by making a single change there. So now instead of looking at the information from this hand, it's looking at the information from the touch area. Okay. And then this is an example of another formula and this is a major one. I think this is the one that does the spread of the frequencies inside the bit graph. And here I said, well, Jesus, that Y component, I want to put it into the touch area, but the other stuff, I still want to keep it under my finger. And that required, in order to do that, I have to do two formulas. So the old formula was formula F, and now the new formula is a combination of formula F plus formula M, and M is from the touch area. So all that information is gathered together. Because M cascades into F, it has the same effect, except now I've split it between those two sort of things. And here is the last one. And again, this would be a parameter that was, this was the, so this is the one that actually was, no, it's not the one that was originally. Yeah, so here's one where I split what was originally from Y on the bottom through the touch area. It's now a combination of Y and Z, but changed. Any changes that I made in these subtle changes, it's playing the Osmose, so it's responding to the different way that it responds. So mathematically they may be different, but sonically they're the right result. Now this guy, this was the last one. So this originally was Formula Y, which was this preset, and that's what Formula Y looks like if you were to express it as an adjustable parameter. So in a continuum, what we've done is we made it adjustable, and you notice that there is shelves on both sides. So as your finger travels from the front to the back, there's always gonna be this area to go, like you can rest your finger in the first 10% or so, and then another 10% over here, but then it travels in a linear fashion from the front to the back. And that's because, you know, your fingers, well, my fingers are fat, and boy, it's really hard to dig right into the edge. And it's nice to have sometimes a safe area where you know, oh, I'm gonna get absolute 0 here, I'm gonna absolutely get 1. On the Osmose, you don't have that issue, really. And also, I wanted to make it continuous, so there is no shelving. So the entire thing, if I wanted to replicate that, I would put a shelf at the start of this guy by dragging this over this way, and then there would be a shelf with the end of it, at the end point, and the high point. But it was unnecessary. And that's my experience with programming between the two. So if you have any questions? No? I'll just say one more thing. It's like what I find is that's not an ideal sound to do it, in actual fact. It's interesting to do it. The new music will come out of that, but the sound is already so expressive here that you wouldn't, I'll probably make little use of it. Although, who knows, I'll play with it and I'll try it. And I've got exactly this setup with this beautiful own in my studio. And so, Lippo was talking about embedded systems, and you know, it is really true. My studio, and probably a lot of you are like this, it's all about ergonomics. And it's about what can I get to? And you have a musical idea you want to play, and boy, if you've got to monkey around, and then you open up your computer and the computer says, do you want to do those updates now? You know, and then you read your news feed in Safari or whatever and say, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, it's a report from sidetrack. It's cool just, so I've got my Osmose set up with the own, and it's just on, and I can just go over there and like immediately start doodling. It's like the beauty of having an acoustic piano or something. My studio's too small for that. But, so I have this, how much time do I have? Do I still have a few minutes? Let's see where we, yeah, so here's a sound that, this was started from scratch on the Osmose, and I don't even think about doing it on the Continuum. But it's a clavichord, and it's got that pitch bend now. You know clavichords, they basically, you play them and they're always pulling the string up like. it's a polyphonic thing. It's
I'm curious, how many people here grew up with or played a lot of clavichord? It's one of the bizarro instruments I heard every day in our house. And yeah, it's just, I've never heard it. He played this over the phone. And then I had this experience where he was, I don't know what you and Rob were doing, but where he changed how the bending works. And I said, oh my God, you wrecked it. But anyway, no, it's...
oh, it's easy to wreck it.
Yeah, but that weird thing that every note is out of tune, well, no, is beautifully pitch shaped.
Yeah. You just can't avoid it if you play something,
And it also has a beautiful dynamic control from pianissimo to pianissimo, and the whole ball of wax. But this is the first time in my life, I think, ever that I heard an acoustic instrument that I'm very familiar with that was immediately just better on the synthesizer. And I think we didn't have a very good. I learned later there's a long history of clavichords. We didn't have a very good one, but.
and when you start to research it, they're all over the place.
Yeah, it was a long time when people had to play in small rooms and play very quietly. Because you can play dynamics, but as he was doing when he played extreme dynamics, it's just totally up to him.
But I couldn't stay away from modifying it. So there is a thing you can do here, is you can put more energy into the string just by giving it a little push into the Y direction. So if you stroke it like this, it'll start to build up. So there's just this noise component in the Y. And there's a tiny bit of that in the clavichord because you're moving the plectrum or the blade point slightly, but it ain't nothing like it. So you can just pulse this.
So I don't know if the clavichord will have a revival, and I don't know if it deserves one. But in any case, this is an instrument that would do it.
It's a very similar thing for the harpsichord. But that one also did that. I know. I need to tune it. I need to
Don't do
tune it.
that. That's not
Yeah. Okay.
We had a harpsichord too, and it didn't.
His dad made a harpsichord. It's pretty amazing. Okay. Yeah.
That clavichord thing, can you show me, the difference between the up and down in the Z,
That's in your sound. That's something I didn't.
Oh, that's not that one?
No. That's something that we modified this thing. So one of the pieces that Rob and I are going to play, it's kind of like he's playing the part of the continuo, and but instead of like playing the chords like this, he's actually putting energy back in by pumping into them, which is a different timbre from the original attack. So you have the choice of the two attacks. So it's quite cool. Okay, c'est tout. That's it.